I'm Claire from Mental Health Chats, and today I'm really excited because I've got Jason Spendelow with me from the Flexible Man Project. Hello, Jason. How are you?
Hi, Claire. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Jason is a coaching and clinical psychologist, and as I just mentioned, he's running a project called the Flexible Man Project. So, Jason, can you tell us a little bit more about the Flexible Man Project, because you're the third speaker for our Men and Mental Health series. So we really want to get a grasp about what this is all about for our Men and Mental Health.
Sure. So Flexible Man Project, we're coaching and clinical psychologists, and the project really came from some of our published research work around men's coping, how they cope with various mental health, physical health kind of challenges in their life, everything from depression to prostate cancer. And we found that there were really some common themes in the way that men try and cope with these challenges in their lives. And one of the ways in which they tried to cope was about trying to kind of define and practice masculinity in flexible or different ways. So their circumstances mean they had to kind of challenge what they thought it was to be a quote unquote real man, and had to, they were kind of forced to change things or vary their view on masculinity as a way to try and cope with the various challenges that they were facing. So we this is how the Flexible Man Project started, and it's a way to work with men in our kind of coaching and kind of clinical practice that says we don't believe in prescribing or telling men what masculinity should be or should look like. We say that you should define masculinity in any way that's kind of consistent with your values, but then try and practice that version of masculinity in a very kind of flexible way, because we know that when people respond to mental health and other psychological challenges flexibly, often that improves their ability to kind of respond and get through the other end in decent shape.
So, okay, that sounds really interesting. So it's all about flexible masculinity. So what is flexible masculinity?
Yeah, for us, we think about flexible masculinity as being divided into three skills, I guess you can call. One's flexible thinking, one's flexible behaviour, and then we've got a third aspect to flexible masculinity, which is kind of compassionate mind training.
So let's go through flexible thinking first of all. So for the Flexible Man Project, for flexible masculinity, what is flexible thinking?
So flexible thinking is saying, let's take your definition of masculinity, or the components of your version of masculinity that you value most, and define them or think about them in flexible ways. So if we take something like resilience, important part of my masculinity, for example, is to be very resilient. So we'd say, let's step back and think about all the different ways we can think about and define resiliency. It may well be kind of a physical resiliency, right, where we're looking to withstand a period of increased stress, for example, and kind of keep going, hold down work, hold down home life without kind of falling over too much. But we also might think about resiliency then as knowing when it's a good time or important time to recruit some extra help to get it through those periods, right? So we're not thinking about resiliency in terms of just being kind of stoic or keeping going. We're talking about resiliency in terms of knowing when it's important to reach out and say, I need some extra skills or an extra bit of support to get through. So that's kind of flexible thinking. You can apply that to other masculinity kind of traits, strength, independence, that sort of thing. Yeah. So that's kind of the flexible thinking aspect. It's not telling men what should be in their list of attributes, but saying, well, whatever attributes you pick, if you think about them in the broadest, most flexible way, that gives you the best chance of coping and doing well in life.
Yeah. So you actually coach men on their flexible thinking and what they're thinking and how they can work with their masculine side on their thinking. Is that correct?
Yeah, we work with men to think about how can I develop the skill of flexible thinking.
Oh, Interesting. And that goes the same with flexible behaviour, the second one that you mentioned?
Yeah, so flexible behaviour is kind of a natural extension on from that. So if I'm thinking about resilience in a flexible, broad way, how can I then practice or demonstrate or show that flexible definition of resiliency? So how does that look like day to day in terms of my behaviours? So as it suggests, that it might be, you know, keeping going, or kind of being stoic through a really tough day, and, you know, trying to hold it together and not show people you're upset or struggling, just as a way to get through the day. But as well, we might also then think about, I'll reach out to someone at the end of the day, get us a bit of support, talk things over, ask for a different person's perspective about what I might be able to do about that. So flexible behaviour naturally goes on from flexible thinking, and that we think about, well, with this aspect of flexible masculinity, how can I do or demonstrate this valued aspect of masculinity in as many different ways as possible? And that opens up different opportunities or options for coping. If we've got a very narrow, inflexible brand of masculinity, usually that then prescribes or really pushes us into a very narrow set of coping responses that then aren't really suited across different situations.
Oh, that's interesting. And often, you know, something that I talk about a lot is mindset. And with mindset, what we're thinking often reflects on our behavior on that. So if we're thinking that we're not resilient enough, we won't behave in a resilient way. Is that what goes with what you coach on as well?
Yeah, basically, we're just saying there's just not necessarily a right or wrong way to think about or define things, but there's quite a big body of coping research out there that says kind of inflexibility in our coping usually leads to worse outcomes relative to those people who are more flexible in their coping, be it through their thinking, the way they kind of approach a situation, as well as how they behave.
Oh, I love this. That's fantastic. So the third one then goes on with the flexible masculinity is the compassionate mind.
Yeah.
So tell us what your thinking is around the compassionate mind.
Yeah, so we've taken a lot of the ideas from the work on compassion-focused therapy, which was developed by a psychologist, 𝗁𝗵𝗆𝗀𝗆𝗀𝗀. And what he talks about with compassion is that we need to kind of understand that there are certain design elements of our brain that we can't do anything about. We were born with these brains. We didn't kind of have a say in what kind of type of brain we wanted implanted in our skulls, you know. And understanding that there's certain things about how we are as people and how we act that are kind of beyond our control, that we didn't kind of control. And the way our brains operate, being kind of very threat-based, for example, this is kind of an evolutionary fact of life, that our brains are developed to work in a certain way. So it's kind of giving ourselves a break for certain ways in which we cope or respond to stress and adversity. So rather than giving ourselves a really hard time and beating ourselves up, which just makes the situation worse, we kind of acknowledge that there's certain truths about our brain that we can't get away from, and we're often battling the kind of emotion-driven survival bit of our brain. We're trying to balance that with the more thinking-based bit of our brain, the ability to kind of perspective take and problem solve and plan, and those two bits of our brain try and balance each other. But if we're not careful, that kind of primitive survival emotion driven bit of our brain can kind of take over and get us to act in ways that we later regret. So it's understanding the biology behind our behavior. That's one part of compassion. And another part of compassion is really trying to counter these very rigid, prescriptive brands of masculinity that says we can only be a certain way, we can only think certain things, do certain behaviors, and when you deviate from that, you're kind of regarded as a failure of not having measured up against this very inflexible strict kind of standard and often a very unattainable brand of masculinity, not to mention how unhelpful it is. So this compassionate mind training is really trying to increase flexibility by not getting caught in the trap of saying there's just one way to be as a man, and if I don't kind of get there, then there's something really wrong with me.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you coach through the compassionate mind strategy on how to get to that space.
Yeah. No, we talk about different strategies, different ways we can utilize compassion or compassionate mind training as a way to increase flexible masculinity.
Brilliant. Excellent. I'm loving these 3 points. So thank you very much, Jason. They're going to be of huge help to everyone. So I'm going to put in the comments your website so that people can contact you if they need some help. So do contact Jason. You're also on social media in a lot of different platforms, on LinkedIn, etc. And next time, to sum up everything on men and mental health. And what I love about the Men and Mental Health series is it also applies to women. It doesn't have to just apply to men. Your specialism is men. So you're talking about the Flexible Man Project, but I've picked up some tips for myself there as well. So thank you for that. And next time we have for our mental health chats, to sum up, is Benny's back to tell us a few facts and extra interesting points about men and mental health. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Jason.
Welcome.
Bye-bye.